A team of elite Marine snipers, armed with the most advanced technology on the planet, were on the brink of failure. Every single shot was a miss, and their confidence was being shattered by a problem no computer could solve. The sun beat down on the California desert, turning the air into a shimmering, distorted lens. 1,000 yards away, a steel target remained untouched, mocking them. These were men who could thread a needle with a bullet from half a mile out, yet today they couldn't hit a dinner plate. They had the best rifles, the most sophisticated scopes, and handheld weather stations that could calculate every variable imaginable. But none of it mattered. Their data was lying to them. With every inexplicable miss, a seed of doubt grew into a tree of frustration, choking the very discipline drilled into them since day one. With their mission readiness hanging in the balance, their last hope wasn't a new piece of gear or a software update. It was a 74-year-old Vietnam veteran who hadn't been in the field for decades, and what he taught them would change them forever. The scene was one of controlled, simmering chaos. On the firing line, at a remote range in 29 Palms, 3 figures in ghillie suits were nearly invisible against the tan dirt and scrub brush. They were a scout sniper team, the apex predators of the Marine Corps infantry. Each one was a product of a brutal selection process, a testament to physical endurance, mental fortitude, and an almost supernatural mastery of marksmanship. Corporal Evans, the team leader, pressed his eye to the scope. He was 24, but his eyes held the focus of a man twice his age. He was supposed to have the answers. Beside him, Lance Corporal Diaz, the youngest, was hunched over a Kestrel 5700X, a handheld device that looked like a sci-fi prop. He called out the numbers, his voice losing its military crispness. Wind is 7 miles per hour, full value from the left. 3.7 mils of elevation, 0.8 mils left windage. Evans breezed out slowly, a practiced rhythm to steady his body. He made the tiny adjustments to his M40A6 rifle, the clicks barely audible. His crosshairs settled on the center of the steel plate, 1,000 yards away. The mirage, the heat rising from the ground, made the target dance and swim. They were trained to account for this, or so they thought. Everything was perfect. His aim was solid, his breathing controlled. He began the slow, deliberate trigger press, fighting the urge to flinch. The rifle bucked against his shoulder, a familiar jolt. He held his position, watching the vapor trail of the bullet, and saw it drift high and to the right. A puff of dust erupted from the dirt, a good 3 feet from the steel. Miss. Again. A low curse escaped his lips. He rolled onto his side, frustrated. "That's the 5th one," he growled. "Same hold, same data. What is going on?" Diaz rechecked the Kestrel. "The numbers are the numbers, man. Maybe it's the ammo." "It's match grade from the same lot," snapped Sergeant Wallace, the team's spotter. "It's not the ammo. It's not the rifles. We've checked everything. Nothing is wrong with the gear." And that was the terrifying part. Their world was built on data, on the predictable physics of ballistics. Their dope books, data on previous engagements, were their Bible. But today, the Bible was wrong. The equation wasn't working. The pride of a Marine sniper is a fragile thing, built on absolute confidence. To miss is one thing. Every shooter misses. But to miss without knowing why is a special kind of hell. It erodes that confidence, replacing it with a gnawing anxiety. You start to see ghosts in the mirage and feel phantom winds. You get in your own head, and once a sniper's in his own head, he's compromised. Evans could feel it happening. Diaz was compulsively rerunning the numbers, as if forcing the machine to give him a new answer. Wallace was second-guessing his own win calls, and Evans, the leader, felt the cold grip of failure. They were supposed to be the best, but out here they were just 3 men throwing expensive bullets into the dirt with absolutely no idea how to stop. This wasn't just a bad day. This was the final week of pre-deployment training. In 2 weeks they were scheduled to be on a plane to a place where the targets wouldn't be steel, and a miss wouldn't just mean a bruised ego. That reality pressed down on them, heavier than the desert heat. Their instructor, Gunnery Sergeant Rivas, stood behind them, arms crossed. A veteran of Fallujah and Sangin, Rivas was a product of the modern Corps, a believer in technology, doctrine, and standardized training. He had overseen this team's instruction, and their failure felt like his own. He'd walked them through the checklist a dozen times. They'd cleaned their rifles, confirmed their zero, calibrated their kestrels. By the book, they were perfect. But the book didn't have a chapter for this. He'd seen slumps, but this was different. This was systemic. 3 elite shooters, all missing in the same baffling way. It wasn't a slump, it was a virus, and he was out of cures. He watched Evans send another round, with the same depressing result. The frustration on the line was a toxic cloud. They were looking to him for an answer, and for the first time in a long time, Gunny Rivas didn't have one. He walked back to the command post and let out a long, weary sigh. There was one last option, a move born of pure desperation. It went against every instinct he had as a modern, data-driven instructor. It felt like admitting his entire methodology was flawed. He picked up his cell phone and scrolled to a name that was more legend than man. Gunny Miller. He wasn't really a gunny anymore. He was a 74-year-old retiree who lived in a dusty house 20 miles away. A Vietnam vet, a sniper from an era of iron sights and instinct.
Rivas had always been polite, but a little dismissive, seeing Miller as a fascinating relic, but irrelevant in the age of digital ballistics. Making this call was swallowing a whole lot of pride. He heard the distant crack of another shot, followed by a heavy silence that told him everything. He pressed the button. "Miller," a gruff voice answered. "Gunny Miller, it's Gunny Rivas out at range 104. A pause. "Everything all right, Gunny? You don't usually call." Rivas took a deep breath. "No, sir, not really. I've got a situation. My sniper team. They can't hit the broadside of a barn, and I'll be damned if I know why." Another longer pause. "You check the gear?" "First thing we did. Everything is perfect. It's not the gear." "It's never the gear," Miller said, and Rivas could have sworn he heard a faint smile in the old man's voice. "What are they shooting at?" 1,000 yards, standard silhouette. "What's the wind doing?" "Kestrel says 7 miles per hour, full value left, but the shots are going all over, mostly high right." Silence. Rivas waited. "Your Kestrel is a liar," Miller said finally. "It's telling you what the wind is doing in your hand. It ain't telling you what it's doing halfway down range, or what the ground is doing to it. You got a bad case of mirage and a tricky thermal updraft. Your boys are shooting at ghosts." A thermal updraft. A textbook phenomenon, but one notoriously difficult to read. The technology often couldn't distinguish it. "So how do we fix it?" Rivas asked. "You don't fix it by looking at a screen," Miller said. "You fix it by learning how to see. I can be there in 30 minutes. "Thank you, Gunny," Rivas said, relief flooding his voice. He hung up and walked back to the firing line. "I've got an old-timer coming down to take a look. A guy from the Vietnam era. Gunny Miller." Evans looked up, confused and skeptical. "A what? You called in a retiree?" The others felt it too. It was an insult. They, with all their advanced training and gear, needed help from a fossil. Their frustration now had a new target, the old man who hadn't even arrived yet. 30 minutes later, a plume of dust announced a beat-up, late-'80s Ford Ranger. The truck groaned to a stop and a man emerged. He moved with the stiffness of someone whose joints had logged more miles than the truck's odometer. He wore faded jeans, a plaid shirt, and a worn USMC baseball cap. He looked less like a legendary sniper and more like someone about to offer a discount on farm equipment. The 3 young snipers exchanged glances. This was their savior? Evans felt a surge of indignation. Gunny Rivas walked over. "Gunny Miller, thanks for coming." Miller shook his hand, his grip surprisingly firm. "Rivas." His gaze drifted past the instructor, out towards the range. He didn't look at the snipers or their rifles. He didn't ask about their computers. He just stood there, head tilted, as if listening to a conversation no one else could hear. "So, what's the trouble?" he rumbled. "We can't get on target," Rivas explained. "Holding for 7 miles an hour from the left, but impacting high and right, consistently." Miller nodded slowly. He walked past the firing line and lowered himself carefully onto the dusty ground, groaning softly. The young Marines watched with a mix of pity and contempt. He didn't pull out any gadgets. He just lay there, propped on his hand, and stared downrange. He plucked a blade of dry grass and watched it flutter from his fingers. He squinted, not at the target, but at the air itself. To the snipers, the mirage was just a nuisance. To Miller, it was a language. "Your problem isn't the wind," he said. "Well, not all of it. Your problem is that rock face." He pointed a gnarled finger to a large outcrop of dark rock. "Sun's been beating on it all morning. It's throwing off heat like a furnace. That heat rises, and when your crosswind hits it,
it creates a thermal updraft. The air isn't just moving left to right, it's curling, rolling over on itself. Your Kestrel can't feel that." He turned to Evans. "What's your computer telling you to do?" "Hold 0.8 mils left," Evans replied tightly. Miller grunted. "Your computer is an idiot. It's smart, but it's not wise. It doesn't have a feel for the world. It only knows the numbers you feed it." Then he did something that baffled them. He told a story. "Reminds me of a time in the Ashau Valley," he began. "We were hunting an NVA officer, had him pinned down across a ravine about 800 yards. Hot, just like this, steamy. The wind was gentle, barely a whisper. All my training told me to hold just a touch into the wind. I took the shot." He paused. The desert seemed to go silent. "I missed," he said simply. Bullets sailed right over his shoulder, and then he knew where I was. The next 2 hours were the longest of my life. When I finally got out, I spent a week thinking about that miss. Why? It should have been a perfect shot. He looked at the young snipers. Took me a while to figure it out. The ravine was full of cool, dense air, but the far side, where he was a sun-baked rock wall. My bullet left my position, flew through the cool air, and then hit that wall of rising heat. It was like hitting a ramp. Kicked the bullet straight up. I hadn't learned to read the land yet. I was just reading the wind. That mistake almost cost me my life, and I never made it again. The snipers were quiet. The story hung in the air, a lesson written in sweat and fear. Miller pushed himself up slowly and walked over to Evans' rifle. "You boys are looking, but you're not seeing. You're trying to force the shot. You got to work with the conditions. Listen to what they're telling you." He tapped the side of Evans' scope. "That thing helps you aim, but the shot comes from here." He tapped his temple. "And from here," he tapped his gut. "It's instinct. Feel. You've got all this fancy gear and you've forgotten how to be hunters." The arrogance on the snipers' faces had vanished, replaced by dawning comprehension. They had been so focused on the science they'd completely ignored the art. They had become technicians, not warriors. In 10 minutes, the old man had dismantled their entire worldview without raising his voice. The air was thick with tension. Gunny Miller had diagnosed the problem not with a device, but with a story. Now, it was time for the practical exam. "All right, son, get back on the gun," he told Evans. Evans did as he was told, his movements now more deliberate. "Forget your Kestrel," Miller commanded. "Turn it off, put it in your pocket." Diaz looked lost, but he switched off the device. The screen went dark, and with it, their entire framework for understanding the world downrange. "Now," Miller said, squatting beside Evans, "look through your scope, but don't look at the target. Focus halfway there. See the mirage?" "Yes, Gunny." "What's it doing?" Evans squinted, forcing himself to see the air. "It's running left to right, but it's sort of shimmering upwards, like a wave." "That's right," Miller nodded. "That's the wind hitting that thermal updraft. Now, pan to the target. See how the edges ripple? That's the air boiling up right in front of your impact zone. That's what's lifting your bullet." It was a revelation. For hours, they'd seen the mirage as visual noise. Miller was showing them it was a roadmap. "Your data tells you to hold left for wind," Miller continued. "But it's not accounting for that lift. That lift is also pushing your bullet with the wind, making its effect stronger. So, you have to hold under the target, and you have to add a little more windage than you think." This was heresy. To intentionally aim low and further into the wind based on a feeling felt like guessing. "Give me your windage," Miller said. 0.8 mils lift, Gunny. Make it 1.1 mils lift. and hold your horizontal crosshair on the bottom edge of the steel plate. Don't hold center mass, hold the bottom edge. The adjustment felt enormous, a contradiction of the data. Evans looked at Gunny Rivas, who gave a single, almost imperceptible nod. Trust him. Evans took a deep breath, letting go of everything he thought he knew. He was taking a leap of faith, trusting the old man's wisdom over his tech. He adjusted the turret. 1.1 mils left. He settled the crosshairs not on the center of the target, but on its bottom edge. It felt like he was aiming at the dirt. His mind screamed at him, "This is wrong." But then he remembered the hours of frustration. What did he have to lose? He cleared his mind and focused. A slow, steady pressure on the trigger. He let the shot break. Crack! The rifle pushed back. He kept his eye on the scope, watching, waiting. The bullet's trace looked too low, too far left. His heart sank. And then, the sound was unmistakable, pure, loud, a perfect note of screeching steel echoing across the desert. It was the most beautiful sound in the world. Through the scope, Evans saw the plate shudder violently, dead center. Not just a hit, a perfect punch. The world stopped. Diaz and Wallace stared, mouths agape. Rivas let out a breath he didn't realize he'd been holding. Evans rolled over and looked at Gunny Miller. The old man wasn't smiling. He just had an expression of quiet satisfaction, the look of a craftsman who knew his trade. "See?" Miller said softly. "The rifle wants to hit. You just have to let it. You have to listen to what the world is telling you, not just what the machine is." He turned to Wallace. "Your turn, son. Same hold." Wallace, his skepticism replaced by awe, got behind his rifle, aimed, and fired. Another perfect strike. Diaz was next. He didn't even glance at his Kestrel. He dialed the correction, held his breath, and fired. Ping! 3 shots. 3 perfect hits. The curse was broken, replaced by a profound sense of humility and wonder. The aftermath was quiet. The young snipers, who had started the day as masters of their craft, now gathered around the old man as apprentices. Corporal Evans was the first to speak. "Gunny, how did you know?" Miller's gaze was patient. "I didn't know, son. Not for sure. I just paid attention," he said. "I've spent more of my life lying on my belly, watching the wind move grass and the heat dance off rocks, than most people have spent sleeping. After a while you start to see the patterns. You learn the language of the land. It's not magic. It's just experience." He pointed out to the range. "That Kestrel of yours is a fine tool. It gives you a piece of the puzzle. But it's not the whole picture. It can't tell you about the cool air in that wash, or how the wind splits around that hill. Your eyes can. Your skin can. You just have to teach them how." Gunny Rivas walked over, the stress gone from his face, replaced by profound respect. "Gunny Miller," he said, extending his hand. "Thank you. You taught my Marines something today that I couldn't." Miller shook it. "You're a good instructor, Rivas. You gave them the science. They just needed a little of the art. The best ones have both." He turned back to the 3 snipers. "Don't ever get so reliant on your gear that you forget what's in here," Miller said, tapping his temple. "This is your primary weapon system. That rifle is just a tool. The shot doesn't come from the gun, it comes from you. The real battlefield is about 6 inches wide, right between your ears." He let that sink in. Patience, and the humility to know you're never done learning. That's what makes a sniper, not the rifle, not the scope. With a final nod, he said, "They'll be all right now."
Shat Meta, Sex 0.05, Rivas. He turned and walked back to his old truck. The engine coughed to life, and with another plume of dust, he was gone. If this story of quiet heroism and timeless wisdom resonated with you, consider subscribing. There are countless stories of veterans like Gunny Miller, whose lessons of humility, service, and experience deserve to be remembered. Click subscribe to help us continue honoring their legacy. That day, 3 Marine snipers learned how to shoot again. But they learned something far more important. True mastery isn't about having the best equipment. It's about understanding the limits of your tools and the boundlessness of experience. Their confidence, once shattered, was now being rebuilt on a new foundation, one forged not from pride but from humility and a newfound respect for the art of their craft. They had been shown the way not by a machine, but by a man who had learned his trade in the jungles of Vietnam, a man who carried the unseen battlefields of the past within him. They would go on to be not just better snipers, but wiser Marines, carrying the lesson that the most powerful weapon in their arsenal is a quiet mind, a patient heart, and the humility to listen to the whispers of the wind. This story is a reminder that behind every science there is an art, behind every piece of data there is a story, and behind every quiet professional there is a depth of knowledge that no computer can replicate. The young Marines learned that the most important target they would ever have to hit was the one within themselves, the target of their own pride, the bullseye of their own humility. And that is a lesson that echoes far beyond the firing line.